Futa si futa. Futa ni career ya msi. It's not just a game. We love to watch the game, but in reality, it's not just a game. I was the only African woman in this class. Everybody else was from Europe and Asia. That's the first time I learned about Chinese league. Imagine. It was shocking. I was like, wait, China has a league. And they were like, yeah, and their league is so good, it's almost competing with the Premier League. So I literally went to look for Chinese league and watch and go like, whoa. And then it was that point when I went, wait, lakini Africa hatuna? There's no way you can tell me the one continent that produces some of the best players we have, hatuna kitu yoyote. We need to get ourselves out of this mentality of looking at football as just football and looking at football as a business, looking at sports as a business. I am pumping money into players who in just one game will be bringing me millions in profit. Even for the players, we have to even get them financial managers, because we've realized when they go there, they get the money, they forget they're supposed to invest back at home. So money is not coming back. You're buying a home in Europe, but what happens when you're deported? You have 10 years to play, but in that 10 years, you need to be able to have created your next 100 years and generations after that. I am Syombua Kibue, and I'm a sports manager by profession. I am the founder of Skia Africa, which is a professional sports management agency based in Nairobi, but represent Africa as a whole. I always tell people sports found me. I wasn't looking for it. It just ilinikutanga tu. So it was at a time when I literally had quit my job. So I had no idea like what I was going to do. And I have a friend of mine who is the one who introduced me to the business. He was having a program here in Kenya, but on last minute, he had an emergency to go back home in Uganda. And so he kept asking people, nani atamsaidia ku hold the fort just for a while since he had to go for an emergency. For some weird reason, everybody was recommending me. I'm not sure why. I think everybody knew I was out of work. So eventually he tracked me down. We had a meeting. He asked me if it was possible just to hold that 1 week. So it was a training course for coaches around Africa. And he was like, a few are going to be flying in, so my work was to help them book the hotels and making sure the venue is available by the time he comes back. And I was like, it's next to my house. I'm not doing anything. It was at December. By then, I think the second week of December. I was like, okay, let me just earn a little money. And that week, for a weird reason, is how I got in and never left. Because I had specific opportunities to sit in class and see what the coaches were learning, because the head coach who was doing the training was from Canada. And I got to listen to what they were training, and I was like, I like this. This is very interesting. So after the 1 week is when I asked, like, so what's this all about? Can I get into it? And he was like, yeah, if you're okay, we can walk this journey with you. And that's how I went in. I was very much a Manchester United fan. That was very, now if I look at it 5 years later, that was very amateur of me because I only watched football as a fanatic, like everybody else, like Kenya. We all love the European leagues. So I had a team, I was solid to that team. I had a group of friends who were also United, so it was there. But being able to have, maybe back in primary school where I was a competitive swimmer, but that was as much as my sports would go. But on the professional side, no. Yeah, that 1 week introduced me into what we call the business of football. And where initially I had to learn how to be a coach, but I realized coaching is not for me. Because so I kept asking more questions. What else is there? What else is there? So as I explored through that journey of figuring out exactly where I feel comfortable, so I had to do a lot of things. So I started with learning how to become a coach, which was Very easy, if I could say, but with what coaches go through, I was like, nah, not there yet. Then I discovered the back office. Now, this was the management side of it. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. And the interesting thing is that I went on LinkedIn, and I followed over almost 2,000 people who are in the football industry. This was just me randomly trying to figure out what I really want to do. And so with that, I ended up meeting a UK team, that's the Professional Football Scouting Association. And the CEO himself sent me a DM on LinkedIn. And he was like, I see you're a lady and you're interested in sports and you talk about football. He was like, would you like to know more? And I was like, yes. And he was like, okay, so for you to start learning first, you have to go to school. Because you can't just, he was like, what's your background? I'm like, I just started, I don't know. And so I'm trying to figure my feet out. And he was like, okay, let me walk you through this. David is 70 years old. He's been in the industry for almost 40 years. And so I was like, okay, are you going to be my mentor? Are you going to? And he was like, yes, I'm very happy to be your mentor. And that's how I ended up with my first school. And that was, now I had to do starter, level 1, level 2, level 3. In these different levels, there's literally a subject, or rather a certificate, known as the business of football, where I had to learn the Spanish football, the French football, the German football, the European football, and the US football. It's basically learning how it is run, how football teams, you see, initially for German and Spain to be able to be the bigwigs that they are, they had to reinvent the wheel of their football entity as a whole, which means they started training. They made every single coach that was going to train anyone in football to go back to school and have actual certification in coaching. And then they made everybody start training from class 1, like Ukoma PP1. That's where training of football started. So kids had books. So football was another subject in school. And so other than it being an extracurricular activity, it was a subject. And then between PP1 and PP3, hapo katikati, they had mini leagues within the zones. And then class 1 to class 3 had another league. So they kept growing. And then the talent managers used to come to these leagues and pick the best talents from them and put them in academy level for now to go the professional side. Then from there, you go to now, with leagues we have from League 3, League 2, League 1, which is now Premier League level. And so now these players started from as young as they could walk. So imagine you've spent your entire life learning how to play football professionally from the age of 4 to the age of 18. By 18 umeiva, ni kuingia the next league kama umeenda. So that's how German started, and then Spain followed suit. Then now they became the people who define football in the world. Then British premiers came in. Then they also adapted a similar way of being able to train their talent, but they came in with the academy level. So academies can even pay for your school fees for you to play for them, and they train you from as young as possible. So you find that we have a young player taken from Kenya at the age of 8, goes into Chelsea Academy. By the time he's 13, he's already traded to Arsenal and keeps going. Futa si futa. Futa ni career ya mse. It's not just a game. We love to watch the game, but in reality, it's not just a game. If we take it from the career perspective, that I started training from the ages of 4, and I have worked with this team and this team and this team, that by the time I am 13, I am qualified enough to be traded to another team in Europe. You see, nikuoneshe the way that it's actually not sifuta too. When I'm on my personal work, when I have to trade players, when I'm representing players, because I usually represent players between the age of 18 to 23 to various European and Asian teams, There's something that we call the player CV. Player CV inanionyeshanga huyu mtoto by the time aanze, he started in which team. Alianzanga team A. By the time aingie primary school, akaanza kutrain na coach fulani. By the time aingie high school, alianzanga na coach fulani. Hizi team zote chini get compensated by the team that takes them. It's supposed to be compensated. And that is why it's very important we all know pali alianza. So naona sai si futa. Sai already kila team inapata compensation yenye imetrain mtoi. Na hiyo ni ya kusema asanti sana, you trained this player very well, continue doing it. So you see, it's not just but hapa hivi mchezo. Watu wanalipwa kutrain player. Okay, so when I started training, it opened me to a new world that I had no idea existed. And this world just got me excited. And that's because I realized it's not just those 11 players on the pitch. There are these 2,000 other people who work to ensure that these 11 make it in those 90 minutes. And that's where I discovered the other careers that are in football. And so there's a career like mine, which is sports management, which is running an entire organization in terms of sports. But we have linesmen, we have referees, and that's just the group that's there. We have managers. Manager, you have the senior manager, assistant manager, and like 4 other junior managers. Kwa team tu moja, you know? And then from there, we have the physiotherapists, we have the doctors, we have the psychologists. All these have to be part of a player's life. On top of that, we have the educators. We have most of the players nowadays, as a recommendation, they're required to have proficiency in English, German, Spanish, and French. But that's because those are the main FIFA languages. And so you have to be in school to learn how to, this other side of life of where you're proficient in these languages. But not only that, ukiendelea huku nyuma, tuko na job from the shoemaker to the person who mwenye anashona balls, to the field, that guy, the gardener, the person who makes sure that that field is that field, ili ndio sisi tuweze kucheza. That is a person who earns a lot, because without him, we have no field and we have no pitch to train. That guy is that guy. Broadcasters, media people. Kwanza media people mko wengi, because another thing I also learned, because I had to do this, was I had to be an analyst for a really long period of time, for almost a year. I was an analyst. And now in analysis, we have player analysis, we have opposition team analysis, we have team analysis, and all these people have different jobs. The opposition analysis main job is to monitor the opposing team and how they play, to be able to advise the coach on their weaknesses and their strengths, so that the coach can adjust his training for his team to beat that team. Player analysis, they focus on an individual player. If we see this player playing, what are his weaknesses? What are his strengths? That way, I'm able to advise the coach. Uyu ukimweka left winger, tuna shida kiasi. But ukimweka on a right wing or a forward, we are on the, from what I see, he's better off maybe, either if not so much of a forward, mweke basi akwe goalkeeper. From the height to the way he jumps to his skill, he looks like he's more proficient as a goalkeeper. And also, they monitor other teams to spot talent that we can buy. And if you're going to go buy, you have to get your analysis with you. Your analyst has to be there to tell you why we are picking that player and convince that team why we are spending millions on that player. So during my, my many classes, I learned, I came across Manchester City. And as I said before, I was United. Sasa nimehama. But Man City showed me what business of football looks like. So initially when Man City started, they were in about a land of 40 acres. They just had a bit of the training ground as well as their home, which is stadium, yes. When the Arab guy bought it, the first thing he asked is, what do we need to do to make Man City Man City? Initially, Man City never used to win anything. As in, I'm sure mnakumbukanga time ya Ferguson, kama kulikuwa na team ya Man City, I think ilikuwa inaenda relegation your time. We did not speak of Man City at all. But when he bought it, he bought his business intellect into football, and he changed the game of football completely. This is a man who went from 40 employees to 2,000 employees for just one team. He put in as much, whatever a player needs, from nutritionist to psychologist to, do you know their team members literally have to go almost 2 to 3 sessions a week to a psychologist just to be able to have their mental sanity, normal before a game. They have to go, the shoes have to be figured out. So he hired an in-house cobbler to make sure their shoes are okay. He hired someone to specifically do their jerseys, but make sure that they're comfortable for the players. But also, he added a ladies' team and also had a children's team. So this way, Man City grew an entire community. This man went to in the UK, there's a place where you register if you don't have a job. And he went there and he asked them, how many people do you have in your database that don't have jobs? This guy said we had about 1,500 people with no jobs. He said we will hire all of them. Hapo, kila mtu akapata job. But now they had to go through a series of trainings for them to see where they would fall. And then everybody was. So on top of the people who are currently working in the organization, he added another lot and then made sure that everyone had a career growth path. And that was so impressive to me because not only was he touching the community, who, by the way, everybody's called citizens, if you're a fan of, of City, but he created whereby you have forever funds, because so long as my mom works for City and I get a discount to train in City, that means I'll forever be a City fan. And for that means my entire family, generation, yenye inafuata, you're guaranteed a job at City when you reach a certain age. So they train you in all these careers that are in there. When we were studying all these leagues, I remember I was the only one who had no league to talk about. Because, again, I was the only African woman in this class. Everybody else was from Europe and Asia. That's the first time I learned about Chinese league. Imagine. It was shocking. I was like, wait, China has a league. And they were like, yeah, and their league is so good, it's almost competing with the Premier League. So I literally went to look for Chinese league and watch and go like, whoa. And then it was that point when I went, wait, lakini Africa hatuna? There's no way you can tell me the one continent that produces some of the best players we have, hatuna kitu yoyote. So that's that point where I was like, my focus has to be building something for Africa, giving Africa what we know we can produce, the best players. So why don't we have same leagues as the ones we love to watch? If I can watch Arsenal, I can watch an African team. And I'm not talking about African team like watching the ones that our federations have created for us to play. No, I'm talking about fully developed, privately owned teams that are as competitive as Man City, as Arsenal, as United, competing on a scale that is equally the same. Truth be told, I don't think Africa has an excuse as why we don't have it. I think it's just that we've gotten used to this level ya hapa chini that we really don't want to improve. But in reality, if we can produce some of the best players, we can produce some of the best teams, and we can have some of the best leagues. There's no reason why we should not have them. But I believe that we need to get ourselves out of this mentality of looking at football as just football and looking at football as a business, looking at sports as a business. I am pumping money into players who in just one game will be bringing me millions in profit. If we look at it in those terms, it stops being just a game and that becomes a business. And I think that's what we need to look at. The same way we are watching Formula One is not just about the people who are racing. It is the business that comes into it. If World Cup, you see how much money is spent on World Cup in building stadiums, making sure hotels. That's the business of football, the money that comes into the country just for that one event. Now imagine that you can have it throughout the year. Personally, I think that people don't know the opportunities available. Because even I, who had to make a deliberate decision to learn about this, it meant I had to go outside Kenya to look for it, totally outside the continent, kabisa. And I had to ask people who are proficient in the industry, like, if you're doing this, how does it go? Where do I start? If I want to go, like, when I learned that there was something called sports law, and there were sports lawyers, I wanted to know what was this industry about and why. And so when I started doing my research on it, I was like, ooh, okay. Now I see why, because when we are having issues with trying to solve sports contracts are totally different than all these other, contracts that people usually have. This is someone's life we are working with. And so a simple mistake can ruin their life completely. A lot of our players will not be able to go through a document that is 60 pages to sign to learn what this contract says. So we had to have people who are able to read. But you see, it's because I had come across quite a number of contracts, and I was like, okay, this is interesting, but how do I get to know more about this? So I deliberately had to ask people, tell me, where can I learn this? And they were like, for this, you need to... My mentor recommended 3 schools. 2 of them required me to be there physically. But I'm an Africa representative. I want to be in Africa. So the 3rd one gave me the opportunity to be an international student, but I had to pay extra for that Zoom session. All of them were out of Africa. There were 2 in the UK and 1 in Netherlands. So I went to the Netherlands one because I was looking, I really had that thing of, I really want to study here, but what happens if I don't get? Now, when I kept asking, I went to South Africa first, then I went to Egypt, and the conditions they were was a bit really tough for African students. I was like, hi, hapa, kuingia ni shida. So when I went to the others, I sent in applications randomly. My name is Syombua, I'm a sports manager in Kenya. I want to do sports law. I've seen you guys offer it. What do I need to get in? And in about 2 hours, I already got a response. They're like, for this particular one, you have to be here physically. I'm like, I can't be physically because I still work here. So is there where I can do an international student? Only 1 school said yes. And that is where I went. And I think before my classes started, I had paid 4 months in advance just to make sure, like, I am committed. I am doing this. And so it opened me to a new world of education that I didn't have. Then I came to understand why we have, anti-doping agency, how it works. I learned the field of arbitration and how sports arbitration works. And I was like, okay, do they understand that in sports law alone, you have so many avenues you can learn, or you can build a career out of these different things, and people would actually get jobs out of it. And it does take a bit of an investment to be in school, but it is worth it. So instead of having 10,000 lawyers in Kenya in one class, they can actually have a good number doing sports law, because that is a field that we actually need, because it impacts even more people, right? We still need normal lawyers because, of course, there are cases that we have to fight that are more on the criminal, so the law of the day will take precedence. But in the normal spectrum of sports where I cannot go through 2,300 contracts. We need more people who are able to read and understand, edit to suit the player and suit the careers that are in between. When the class for anti-doping started, initially I already had a few cases in my head that I wanted the lecturer to please explain to me how. And so when I was going through it is when I realized, hey, Uku, it's worse than I even thought it would ever be. And that's because things that are supposed to be very obvious are not obvious. You see, in the anti-doping industry, it is for the player to prove they did not do what they did. But when I had to get the anti-doping file to see the products that are banned, I could not even tell you what page 1 has. I was like, ini lugha different. So I had to call a friend of mine and I'm like, what is this? So I was thinking to myself, kama mimi mwenyewe siwezi, I can't even understand I can understand the heading. Lakini ukiniambia hizo zingine, I don't know what these drugs are. How do they look like? Is there a combination? As in, how do you trace them in situations like this? And the guy was like, that's how it is. That's how it's supposed to be. Like, every information you need to learn about anti-doping is in the anti-doping website. And I was like, mbona huyo mtoto wako mashinani? How is he, where a cyber is so far, you really want to tell me this kid has to go all the way to the cyber, ask that cyber person, ebu nitolee hiyo page ya anti-doping, tuangalie ni nini iko. Kwanza, will they even know what that is? To start there. Because you have this list of things that are supposed to be banned, but does the rest of the community know what they are? Are they in our normal food? If I combine sukuma wiki and maybe managu and something else, will it release a chemical that is in me that will be traced, and now I have to prove to you people it's the sukuma wiki that I ate 2 weeks ago that was contaminated for this case to happen? And so I think that class started at 7 p.m. and ended close to midnight because we were not, hatukuwa tunapatana. And personally, because I wanted to understand why the anti-doping laws, mostly in Europe and the US, were slightly lenient as opposed to what Africans are dealing with. When I say lenient, it means like, okay, so there's this rule in Europe where if you take cocaine on a recreational purpose, you cannot be fined by your anti-doping agency. Only that you have to stop before your race starts or before you go into training for your races. But on a recreational purpose, and you can prove it was on a recreational purpose, it would be okay. Now, there's a situation where there was a case a couple of years ago of where there's a player who got an injury. And this is in Europe. And so because he knew he was not going to play because of the injury, he went to the club with his friends. He ended up making out with some lady. And then by the time he was coming to be tested the next day before he said he wasn't racing, they found traces of cocaine. Now, for anyone who knows cocaine, it even shows in your hair. So when they tested his hair, they couldn't find it, which means he got it from a third party. When he traced back, it was from that kiss that he had. And he was like, oh, it was for that kiss, but I wasn't even training anyway. So yeah, that's the reason as to how I got it. He actually got about, I think, a fine for a month, which again was his healing time, which to me would be very lenient. Unlike when in Kenya, Omanyala, who literally had a knee injury and went to a doctor who gave him 2 jabs. And even after telling the doctor that I am an athlete, these medicines can have to be strict and on course because it can't be traced on my body, the doctor assured him that there was no way that these 2 medicines could have any issue. Unfortunately, the doctor did not know the combination of the 2 can cause something different. And you see, he ended up being fined for a month. For a year. He was actually suspended for a year because of that. Something that even the doctor himself had no idea could happen. So you see, I find a couple of the things too strict when it comes to the African side of things as opposed to the European side of things. We have people who are, if you look at the anti-doping agency for Kenya, they have a list of everyone who's been banned for 4 years. And we know for a fact that if you ban me for 4 years and I'm 25, and you know very well, sports knee is a small window of, I could be out of playing by the time my suspension is done, or rather my ban is done. So it doesn't make sense why, I get why we have to be strict, but it also doesn't make sense that we are on higher levels of being strict as opposed to other nations. it's time for football to now work for us. It has been working for other people for so long. We've been giving away talent for so long. It's time for us to start retaining this talent for ourselves. And I keep saying, give me a few years, give me 2-3 years. We shall be having an Africa Premier League, because I believe in the fact that we can do it. We have the resources, we have the land, we have the infrastructure knowledge, and we also have the funding, because there's a lot of money in Africa. We just need to be able to put it in the right place. And also because there's so much careers into this, you will realize it catches football on its own, or sports on its own, touches every single department you can think of. From agriculture, it can be easy to even sort that Vision 2030 into that mix, because people have to eat. And nutrition is very important, not only for players, but for people as a whole. You know, physical, most people go to the gym. Those guys who train you at the gym are also needed in the sports sector, because they are the physical trainers. These are the guys that push your bodies to the limit. You have to have someone who has studied the industry that will tell you you cannot push your body to a certain level. But to this point here, you can do that. And we have to have our physiotherapists working with our physical trainers to let them know that, no, from here to here, this is how you warm up, this is how you cool down. It takes an entire group of people, so many people, for you to be who you are. And that's the world I want to open people to. Si wale players peke, lakini everybody else who makes it what it is where the careers are. And you see, imefika point where even for the players, we have to even get them financial managers, because we've realized when they go there, they get the money, they forget they're supposed to invest back at home. So money is not coming back. You're buying a home in Europe, but what happens when you're deported? Yes, you see, when it comes to sports in France, when France buys you as a player, they usually give you a France doesn't have dual citizenship. So you have to be a first level immigrant with them. So you become their citizen. And then now, when you become their citizen, everything that they give you is in France. So the money they pay you, you pay taxes there. You play for them for a long period of time, but wakisha maliza, unarudishwa kwenyu. Na kwenyu si France, kwenyu ni ile inchi ulitoka. You and your citizenship and everything else, you're back to your home country. Shida ni, everything that you worked for your time, haurudi nayo home. So you come back home kama player wa kawaida. Hauna do, hauna everything, because you invested everything there. They gave you everything to invest there, but they gave you no knowledge to invest back at home. So what are you coming back to? And you see, this is education that players need to know. You have to have continuity. You have 10 years to play, but in that 10 years, you need to be able to have created your next 100 years and generations after that. And you see, looking at players like akina Samuel Eto'o, these are people who walijanjaruka kitambo. So what did they do? They started building their foundations. So they put in football academies in Cameroon and several others. By the time he was retiring kabisa, si alirudi na akaingia football industry as the head of the federation. Now he's working towards making it that it can work and benefit for Cameroonians. We need to see the same continuity in the rest of Africa. Si ati unarudi kama Dennis Oliech, kila mtu anakuangalia, Harambee Stars inakupatia 3M kucheza and you were pay 200 million at some point. No, you need to come back as a mentee or a mentor. Because the rest, do you know how many kids would want to see some of these great players come to their academies to talk to them? He could literally just earn money being a mentor. Straight up. Go to different academies, talking to them, telling them, kufika kule inakaa hivi. When you're training, it looks, use my life as an example. You get? And that's what we need. We need people to understand that When you're going there, it's for a career space, but we also need you to invest back home so that you have something to fall back on. It's a business. Let's focus on building the business of football. And that's developing your country as you continue. Because if you come back and develop another 10 talents, those 10 will come and develop another 20. Those 20 will become, and it grows. So it becomes a continuous cycle of continuing to create talent. And so like if you don't make it in playing as a player, consider another career in the industry. It could even be more lucrative than what you thought a player would give you, as a player you'd get. And the most interesting thing, I actually self-nominated myself for the Zuri Awards. And I think if they check my application, it came in at around midnight. And that's because I sleep late. But that's because for some weird reason between 9 and 2, I'm very much alert. And so I was doing some work when I ran into the application. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I decided to fill. And the questions were very interesting. So I was like, I have an answer for this. And so after a while, I got the call. And they were like, you passed the nominations. I was like, wait, are you serious? And it was so funny because Milka was like, well, you didn't believe in yourself? I'm like, I even forgot I had applied. But this is so amazing. Yes, what do you want me to do? Okay, first, I didn't even think that we were many people who apply for it. I had no idea. I actually learned during the ceremony itself. But it was just one of those things I was like, you know what? I believe in myself. Let me do this. And so I passed and kept passing, and I kept shocking myself. I remember telling my mom, wait, I passed. And my mom was like, huh? I'm like, me too. I'm like, we need to do this. But I've met such a great team of people. And the exposure that I've gotten from Zuri Awards itself is that my voice became a stronger voice. I did have a voice initially, but the echo that Zuri Awards gave me was louder. And so now people started paying attention to what I was saying. For the good thing is that a few times, for those places where I used to go and they were like, msichana anatuambia nini? Sahi niko na sauti. I'm like, do you see I am a Zuri Award alumni? Credibility was in there. And so it actually gave me the courage to now start my own organization. Because initially I signed in when I was in a different one. And so when I left, I was like, I need my voice to be my voice. And that with where I want to go, I need people to be able to see it as me talking about it. And the backing that Zuri gave me allowed me to be able to do that. It gave me the courage to do that. Initially, I had that excuse of, I still don't have a voice. I still need to create a name for myself. And my friends were like, you already have a name. Like, you got nominated over the people who came in. Someone somewhere sat and saw what you're doing and realized you have a purpose. So take on it and run with it. And I go for all their trainings, except I think moja tu yenye nilikuwa away. But I deliberately make sure that I go for the trainings. I deliberately make sure that as many people as I can talk to, I talk to them. Because it's a learning journey. I will always be learning. There is no end to how much I can learn. You see, every time I learn something new, I realize that I actually did not know much. So it becomes such a humbling experience to learn something again. Like from the Zuri team, I've learned in regards to having structure in the organization. Because most times in the mimi ndio CEO, mimi ndio secretary, mimi ndio a team, you have to have a team. And this team is the one that makes sure that you're moving forward. You need to be accountable to someone when you're moving forward. And as much as I like to learn every single thing, I also have to be able to let other people help me in this journey as I continue. And I've learned that from the Zuri team. They're like, we are here for you. What do you need? And I've learned to be like, oh, wait, I need like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do we go about it? We know someone who can work with you on this. And they come through, because most times I have the idea, but I need another person to come through and see how we can put it on paper. Because I think if I put it on paper, it'll look like 100 pages of a mess. So there's someone who needs to see it, actualize it, and then be able now for me to continue with pitching and growing it. Yeah.